Weathering the storm, forest succession in Point Pleasant Park after Hurricane Juan.
In this study, we are going to explore the ecological section of a major climate event, Hurricane Juan, on Point Pleasant Park. Point Pleasant Park, located in Halifax, Nova Scotia, is more than just an urban green space. Urban forests provide us a home for animals, plants, giving humans a peaceful nature. In September 2003, Hurricane Juan caused huge damage to the park, uprooting thousands of trees. This gave us a great opportunity to examine how this urban forest is recovering to its climate community. Point Pleasant Park is culturally significant for the Mi'kmaq Nation, making it important to integrate the indigenous perspectives with ecological studies. Understanding the dynamics is critical as the climate change intensifies damage like hurricane. In our objective and hypothesis, we are going to talk about how the secondary sections help the ecosystem recover, explore how ecosystem develop into climate community over time, and highlighting the role of urban parks in supporting biodiversity and ecological balance. Hypothesis: as urban parks grow and develop, they undergo secondary section, tending toward a climate community, which creates a more stable and sustainable ecosystem over time.
In order to understand the ecological succession in Point Pleasant Park after Hurricane Juan, data was collected in 6 20 by 20 meter study sites. These plots were established in 2004 in areas most affected by the hurricane. In each site, all the living trees with a diameter at breast height, or DBH, of at least 2.5 centimeters were identified and measured. DBH was taken at 4.5 feet from the ground following industry standards. The density of each species per 400 square meters was calculated to assess how the forest composition changed over time. Additionally, a linear regression analysis was performed to examine trends in the total tree density, DBH, species richness, Shannon diversity index, and evenness. Linear regression analysis was performed in this study as it allows researchers to quantify trends over time and determine whether changes in the forest community follow a predictable pattern. The collected data spans from 2004 to 2024, with gaps in 2005, 2007, 2016, and 2020 due to other hurricanes and the COVID-19 pandemic. These methods provide insight into how the forest community has developed post-hurricane disturbance and how it may continue to change in the future. In order to understand the changes in the park over time, we can observe our statistical results. This figure represents the total density of trees in Point Pleasant Park from 2004 to 2024, showing a steady increase over time. The trend suggests the forest community is recovering steadily from Hurricane Juan's disturbance. Increased total density indicates progression from an early successional community to a more stable stage. The upward trajectory aligns with the classical forest succession model that predicts that over time, shade-tolerant, late successional species will establish and outcompete earlier species. Overall, the figure shows a strong positive increase in tree density over the years from 2004, right after the hurricane, to 2024. The R-squared value of 0.49 suggests that while density is increasing, other factors influence succession as well. The p-value that is less than 0.001 confirms statistical significance, reinforcing that the observed increase in density is not due to random variation. However, the variability in the dataset suggests natural disturbances also have an effect on succession rates. The trend line shows a clear increase in tree density over time, with an R-squared value of 0.49, suggesting moderate correlation. The steady rise in density reflects natural forest succession following the severe disturbance caused by Hurricane Juan in 2003. Looking ahead, we can predict that the forest will continue to transition towards a more stable forest community. However, several factors could influence this trajectory, such as human intervention, invasive species, climate change, or other significant storms. Therefore, while we expect continued growth in density and diversity, management strategies will play a crucial role in shaping the forest's long-term trajectory.
In 2004, red spruce was the dominant species in the forest. In the role of strategist, it means it has a slow growth but long-lived and stabilized population in a stable environment. Due to its density, It does not rapidly increase in population and contains a small population size. Graph showing us that the trend line of population growth and indicate that they are the early succession species, which means population does not usually fluctuate a lot. The changes in dominant species after the Hurricane Juan from 2004 to 2024 has tended towards the climate community. Over time, we can predict that community will shift toward more stable ecosystems, with the species best adapted to long-term conditions becoming dominant. By 2024, density of the dominant species red maple is tending to have rapidly recovered after the declines from Hurricane Juan in 2003. Graph showing us that it is a well-adapted species to our environmental change and disturbance. From 2004 to 2024, the density of the dominant species red maple have significantly increased to the highest density 184 individuals in 2019. It drives us that the population towards the climax community. As a result, it has become the dominant species in the forest during this period. Since both of the species have a low R2 values, this suggests in that time does not strongly explain in variation in their population densities.
Understanding the recovery of species richness after a drastic event like Hurricane Juan is important for conservation biology to be able to predict recovery after future catastrophic events. As you can see, Figure 4 displays species richness between 2004, a year after Hurricane Juan, and 2025. So as you can see, there's a strong correlation because R squared is greater than 0.6, and the p-value is 2.2 times 10 to the negative 16, meaning we reject our null hypothesis that there is no correlation and accept the alternate that there is. So this means that our trend line of a positive linear increase is able to predict some of the data and is a good fit. The reason we saw this forest recovery was that many native species were returning to the area via nearby sources, spreading seeds as the forest followed a normal secondary succession trajectory. Since this forest is recovering following a standard secondary succession model, we can assume that as the forest reaches climax community, where there is very little change in species composition, there will be a decrease in the rate at which the species richness increases and eventually levels off. However, we may be able to expect that the new baseline of species richness will be higher than the original species richness due to how the storm established microsites, which are new niches such as fallen down logs. Understanding the recovery of species richness directly after a drastic event is important for conservation biology to be able to predict recovery after future events. This graph depicts species recovery from 2004 to 2014 in Point Pleasant after Hurricane Juan in 2003. As you can see, the trend line indicates a linear increase, and the R value of higher than 0.6 indicates that there is a low spread in the data and is strongly close to the trend line. The p-value backs this up with it being 5.45 times 10 to the negative 10. Since this value is less than our alpha, it means that species richness can be estimated from year using the regression equation that is on the graph. The regression equation indicates that there is a linear increase in species richness over time, directly following a catastrophic event. Understanding recovery of species richness a few years after a drastic event is also important for conservation biology. Figure 6 depicts the species richness over a year from 2015 to 2024. This stands in stark contrast with the graph from before, which was 2004 to 2014. As you can see, that one, the previous graph, had a linear increase, and this graph no longer has a linear increase and a very low R-squared value, indicating that a lot of the fluctuations are due to random chance. The p-value was also very high, of 0.5281, meaning that we failed to reject our null hypothesis that species richness is predicted by year, and instead could be due to random fluctuations. This indicates that the early stage of succession where species are arriving has ended. So Point Pleasant as an urban park can experience different succession than wild areas. An example of this is that after the storm from 2003 to 2008, 70,000 trees were planted. This speeds up the succession stage since there's more shaded areas than a wild area, which would normally take longer for shaded areas to establish themselves. Urban parks are also different because they undergo cleanup. So fallen down logs, which previously would create microsites, are cleaned up. Microsites have been proven to increase biodiversity. So when they are cleaned up, this increase in biodiversity does not actually occur. So in conclusion, Point Pleasant Park is in a middle stage of secondary succession, which is sped up by the planting of trees. This is indicated by how the tree density is still increasing due to shade-tolerant species still colonizing the open space. Also, the pioneer tree species, red maple, is still ahead in population, where the climax community it would be outcompeted by the red spruce. Species diversity has leveled off in recent years, indicating that early succession has ended and middle succession has begun. An indigenous practice that we could use for Point Pleasant is the process of Mitakuye Oyasin, the idea from the Lakota Nation that we are all related. This practice encourages us to take care of future generations since we are all related to everything around us. We would like to thank the Dalhousie University and Biology 2060 team for their guidance. We would also like to thank the Field Collection team, the Mi'kmaq Nation for their knowledge and insight, and the Point Pleasant Management for supporting this ecological research. Here are our references.